I discovered the terrifying secrets of Chinese emperors and their cursed fate for female eunuchs. I never should have opened that door. My heart raced as I stood there, hand hovering above the cold brass knob. The air was thick with the scent of ancient dust, and I could almost hear the whispers of long-gone souls lurking in the shadows. It was just another Thursday evening, the kind where I'd curl up with my favorite herbal tea and binge-watch documentaries about history. But this was different. I'd stumbled onto a hidden corner of the internet, a rabbit hole that promised to unveil the dark mysteries of the Forbidden City. Curiosity tugged at me, pulling me closer to the unknown. As I stepped inside, a chill swept through the dimly lit room. The walls were lined with yellowed texts and faded photographs. The temperature dropped, and I could see my breath in the air. My skin prickled as a faint rustle echoed behind me. I turned quickly, but it was just the remnants of old paper fluttering like ghosts in the night. Every creak of the floorboards felt amplified in the eerie silence. Images flashed in my mind, impresses draped in silk, their faces pale and haunted. The history books told tales of their glamour, but what about the darker truths? The female eunuchs, whispers said, were doomed to serve, abandoned once their beauty faded, their fates sealed by the whims of powerful men. I could almost hear their cries, their pain reverberating through time. Suddenly, something shifted. An object fell from the shelf, a dusty scroll, rolling toward me like a warning. The noise was jarring, breaking the stillness and sending a shiver down my spine. I picked it up, my fingers trembling. The ancient script looked alive, almost pulsing under my touch. It spoke of rituals and curses, of a fate worse than death for those who defied the emperor's laws. The shadows flickered in the corners of my vision as if something was watching from beyond. My heart hammered. I felt heavy, trapped in a cold nightmare where history and horror entwined. I could hear a low groan, unmistakably human, clawing its way from somewhere deep within the darkness. I wanted to scream, but my throat tightened, choking on the air thick with dread. Just when I thought I might escape, a shadow detached itself from the wall. It loomed larger, twisting into a figure that was both familiar and terrifying. I could feel my heartbeat roaring in my ears, and a lump formed in my throat, paralyzing me. My eyes widened, brimming with terror. Something was reaching for me. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The shadow lunged forward, an amorphous shape that smelled of stale incense and decay. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body refused to cooperate, anchored by sheer terror. It twisted and turned, absorbing the faint light like a hungry predator, its presence suffocating. With a burst of adrenaline, I stumbled back but collided with the shelves, sending a cascade of brittle scrolls crashing to the ground. A chorus of whispers erupted around me, overlapping and indistinct, yet I recognized them, voices of the Forsaken. They seeped into my brain, infectious and cold. I clutched my head, trying to block them out, but their wails only grew louder, clawing at the fabric of my sanity. You should not have come here. You have awakened the curse, they moaned in an unearthly harmony that I barely managed to keep my footing as the ground beneath me quaked. The walls seemed to pulse, drenched in shadows that danced like flames. Those flickering forms began to take shape, revealing pale faces with hollow eyes staring at me from within the darkness. Each one was a grotesque reminder of the female eunuchs who once lived in servitude, their beauty wilting into despair and madness. Leave. You are next. A voice hissed, sharp and accusing, penetrating the fog of my panic. I could feel the icy tendrils of fear wrapping around my heart, tightening with every word. I turned to the doorway, my escape so close yet so far away. But the figure, still cloaked in darkness, advanced with an impossible speed. It was as if I had awakened something ancient, something festering in the annals of history, now unleashed from its prison. That I whimpered, grasping for the doorknob, my trembling fingers were slick against the cold metal. The whispers now transformed into a cacophony of laughter, harsh, mocking sounds that filled the room like smoke. "You think you can just leave?" Their voices mingled into a chilling symphony that sent icy shivers down my spine. Just as I managed to twist the knob, the door slammed shut, rattling on its hinges as if in the grip of a violent storm. Panicking, I turned back, desperation coursing through my veins. "What do you want?" I gasped. The shadows contorted and twisted, and then I saw it. A face emerged from the depths, resembling the portraits I had seen in dusty books, the haunting visage of an empress, long gone but forever trapped between worlds. Her eyes were filled with sorrow, yet they burned with a fierce intensity that held me captive. "No escape," she whispered in a voice that sent dread cascading through my bones. "You may join us, or you can become one of us." Forever bound to serve. The walls trembled violently, cracking and peeling as the very essence of the room pressed in on me. My heart raced, bile rising in my throat. I had to do something to break this unholy connection. Just as I summoned the courage to face the terrifying specter, the air shifted, and I felt a sharp pull at my core. It was as if the room itself recognized my panic and fed off it, growing stronger, more alive. No. I cried out, a primal instinct for survival igniting within me. I bolted towards the other side of the room, searching for something, anything, that I could use to ward off the unnatural presence. The shadows writhed, releasing anguished cries as my movement sparked their fury. Suddenly, I felt an icy breath against the nape of my neck, sending my senses into overdrive. I froze, heart hammering against my ribcage as icy fingers brushed my skin. I turned, and what lay before me was no longer just the Empress, but a horde of spectral figures, their lifeless eyes seething with hatred and despair. "Join us," they chorused, their combined voices weaving a tapestry of dread that engulfed me. I was cornered, suffocated by their despair, heart racing as the weight of their tragic tales pressed down on me. I could feel myself slipping away, the shadows closing in. Just as I struggled to break free, a mesmerizing light flickered in the far corner, a single, defiant flame. It was flickering as if beckoning me to reach for it, but just then, a piercing scream echoed around me, shattering the tension and drawing the specter's attention away. The sound was terrifyingly close, venturing from the back room I had previously overlooked. The shadows hesitated, recoiling momentarily. It was an invitation of sorts, a choice I had not asked for. As I turned to the source of the scream, the door burst open, and something vile rushed out, its form indistinguishable, teeth gnashing and eyes blazing with a different kind of hunger. The laughter of the lost and forsaken grew louder, drowning everything else out like an oppressive tide. I was caught in the taut string of fate, suspended between two horrors, a desperate need to fight against the curse of the past and the monstrous entity now loose in the room. My breath hitched in my throat, and I stared into the deep darkness with nowhere to run. And then, it lunged. I stumbled backwards, my heart an erratic metronome as the grotesque form lunged for me, a blur of shadow and gnashing teeth that glimmered with an otherworldly light. Panic surged through my veins, paralyzing yet fueling that primal instinct for survival. The room pulsed with fear as I felt the shadows wrap tighter around me, clawing at my sanity, every anguished scream of the lost echoing through the air like an ominous requiem. In that moment of frozen horror, the faces of the forsaken women danced around me, their expressions twisted into an unholy blend of anguish and insatiable longing. "Help us," one wailed, her arms outstretched, fingers curling like wilted petals. I could feel their despair, the chilling wind of their suffering spiraling around me as if urging me to join their eternal wretchedness. I pressed my back against the cold wall, the stories etched into the surface pulsing beneath my palms, flakes of plaster raining down like old memories shedding their skin. With the entity closing in, a desperate thought flashed through my mind: what if I could find a way to appease the spirits of the past? Perhaps if I could prove I understood their anguish, they would show me a way out of this nightmare. Your fate was not meant to end like this. I screamed, cutting through the cacophony, trying to pierce the veil of their suffering. "I'm here to learn. I want to help." The response was thunderous silence, the shadows stilling momentarily, their grotesque faces fading to reveal a tapestry of memories woven into the fabric of the room. I exhaled slowly, realizing I could hardly breathe, the air thick with dread and the scent of decay. The entity loomed closer, an unrelenting force of malice, gnashing its teeth in a grotesque grin that sent shivers cascading down my spine. Suddenly, the whispers returned, resonating with a new fervor. "The crown, the crown!" They chanted, weaving their horror-laden tales into one agonizing tapestry of betrayal and eternal servitude. As if complicit in their wretched past, I stumbled my way to the center of the room where a forgotten mahogany chest lay half-hidden beneath the tattered remnants of a once grand rug. Gritting my teeth, I flung the chest open, splintered wood creaking in protest. Inside lay an ornate golden crown, encrusted with gemstones that sparkled like the lost souls of the eunuchs themselves. As I lifted the crown from its resting place, the room exploded into a maelstrom of shadows, swirling around me like a tempest of anguish. A piercing wail filled the air, and for the first time, I felt their pain coalesce into something manageable, tapping into a well of desperation deeper than mine. "Wear it!" A voice shrieked ahead of the others, overriding the chaos. "Release us!" With shaking hands, I placed the heavy crown upon my head. A glow enveloped me, blinding in its intensity, as the shadows recoiled, writhing with visceral rage. The presence of the entity shifted, fuming with seductive malice. It stopped in its tracks, its eyes narrowing as if recognizing the power that surged forth from the crown. It hissed, a venomous sound that coiled around me like ropes, tightening my chest as the air turned thick with malice and despair. The shadows erupted in turmoil, writhing against the ceiling, their faces distorting into ghastly visages twisted in fury and longing. "You have only begun to understand, child." The whispers crescendoed, merging into a beautiful yet mournful melody that reverberated through the old bones of the building. "The burden of their fate is your own." A sudden jolt coursed through me, as the crown linked my spirit with their wretched echoes, revealing glimpses of their sorrow. The weight of forgotten women who had languished in the darkness of a wicked empire flooded my mind. Fueled by their grief, the entity lunged once more, but this time, I was prepared. I held my ground, a pulse of defiance igniting the depths of my soul. "Let me show you the truth of your suffering," I shouted, channeling their anguished stories into the fabric of reality. The walls began to shake violently as layers upon layers of histories pressed against me, and with each beat of my heart, I began to feel the collective power of those who had been wronged. But just as I gathered the strength needed to confront the creature with their combined rage, a mirror of shadows coalesced in the corner, and through its nebulous surface, I saw a reflection of myself not as I was, but as a twisted, euphoric version of my desperation. My eyes widened in horror, recognizing the flicker of lost hope I had been suppressing within myself, now twisting and writhing to take form. The crown slipped from my grasp, clattering to the ground, shattering the fragile pact I had forged with the spirits of the damned. The laughter returned, triumphant and chilling, as the last remaining vestiges of light flickered one last time before being dragged into the abyss. Before I could react, the original entity lunged, teeth gnashing hungrily as my vision blackened, consumed by a wave of despair and a savage hunger for madness. And in that moment of encompassing darkness, I finally understood the truth of the cursed fate that awaited all who dared to awaken the past. I awoke in disorienting silence, the echoes of my own heartbeat thrumming in my ears. The walls around me trembled gently, as if the very foundation of this forsaken place was holding its breath. The crown lay thwarted on the floor, its remnants gleaming ominously amidst the gloom, mocking me like the laughter of the forsaken. That I struggled to sit up, my body heavy, burdened by shadows that seemed to cling to my skin like a second layer, an insidious whisper of that otherworldly realm I had briefly invaded. The room was unchanged, yet somehow, it felt different, more oppressive, a tangible weight pressing against my soul. The women's faces still haunted me, their suffering deeper etched into my memory, but now there was something else, a new, insidious presence that coiled around my thoughts like a serpent biding its time. A foreboding chill poured through the gaps in the crumbling walls, stirring lingering remnants of the other spirits that had been drawn to me. Desperation clawed at my insides, latching onto the remnants of hope that threatened to slip away. With a grim determination, I lurched to my feet, wading through the disarray of splintered furniture and the remnants of forgotten dreams. As I moved deeper into the room, the air seemed to thicken, wrapping itself around me like chains, squeezing out the last vestiges of comfort. On the far wall, a mural came alive, a grotesque tableau that depicted the rise and fall of past dynasties, the potent rulers locked in eternal struggle with the spirits of the women they had wronged. My breath hitched in my throat. Among the painted figures, I recognized familiar faces, twisted in horror yet clinging to hope, a harrowing reminder of the price paid for power. I reached toward the mural, my fingers brushing against the surface. A wave of sensations crashed over me: heart pain, betrayal, and an inexplicable sorrow that dulled my will to fight. It was as if the spirits were trying to communicate, their grief slithering into my mind through the brushstrokes of despair. I felt the gentle tug of their tails coalescing with mine, each pulse of their anguish igniting buried memories, itching to surface. Suddenly, a low growl erupted nearby, raw and feral, breaking the spell of the mural. I whipped my head toward the sound, heart racing anew. Emerging from the shadows, loomed the entity that had once recoiled at my misplaced power, now emboldened by my moment of weakness. Its form was ever-changing, now a sinister predator, now a shroud of darkness, each flicker gracing it with an even more terrifying presence. "You thought you could grasp their pain and wield it," it hissed, a symphony of hisses echoing through the cavernous room. "You have only given me a taste of their anguish. You are mine, now." Fear washed over me in icy waves, but there was no escape. Instead, I felt my own fury igniting as memories of the women whirled in my mind like a storm. Their agony became a beacon in the dark, beckoning me to draw strength from their suffering. "I will not let you take me," I shouted defiantly, the words spilling from my lips like fire. "I will end this." My eyes darted around, searching for anything that could aid me. Then I spotted a flickering lantern catching the glimmer of light from the shattered crown. In that moment, a thought ignited: what if I could use the remnants of the crown to amplify our collective rage and bind the entity to its own chaos? The shadows writhed, furious at my defiance, and charged toward me. I grabbed the lantern, cradling its warmth as I clutched the fragments of the crown. The room shook violently, the mural peeling and bubbling like flesh burnt in a fire. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, slashing at me as phantom hands clawed through the air, desperate to drag me back into despair. "Release them," I cried out, channeling every ounce of fury, grief, and defiance from the women who had so artfully woven their tales into my being. The lantern pulsed, a small pulse of white light igniting a crack in the dark. I hurled it forward, shattering it against the ground, letting the light surge outward. It illuminated the room, revealing the grotesque painting alive with anguished expressions, alive with memories, stories of the damned begging for liberation. For a moment, I stood at the epicenter, awash in radiant energy. But then the entity howled, a sound both terrible and alluring, its form coiling and entwining with the remnants of the crown, pulling both my torment and theirs toward an unholy communion. Just as hope flickered brightly in my chest, a sinister voice whispered in my ear, as caustic as the entity's proximity. "You desired to understand their sorrow? Experience it, then. All of it." I felt tendrils of darkness wrap around me, my mind fraying at the edges as the laughter grew louder, fusing with my own thoughts. It was no longer voiceless terror, it spoke in layers of pain, my own struggles laced with the agony of every wronged woman, a tidal wave of despair that threatened to drown me. And when I looked into the depths of that boundless darkness, I saw my reflection once more, a blend of agony and longing, yet this time, my face twisted into a malevolent grin. I was losing myself in their torment, tethered by the very emotions designed to empower me. Just then, the shadows pulled back, revealing another figure emerging from the depths of darkness behind the entity, another spirit, a woman, with eyes sparkling like dying stars. "Help me," she whispered, her voice threading through the chaos, "before it is too late." And as the entity bore down on me, its form shifting into a grotesque mockery of the crown itself, I realized that the choice was no longer mine. But who could I save, and at what cost? The weight of the looming spirit pressed down upon me, a palpable dread woven tightly with the fabric of reality. My heart thundered in response to the spectral woman's plea, the echo of her sorrow riding along the currents of darkness, spiraling deeper into my very core. Her face, though twisted with anguish, bore an unmistakable beauty, flickering like a candle in a storm, dimmed but not extinguished. "Help me before it is too late," she breathed again, and in that moment, the shadows seemed to recoil as though fearing her words. The entity, too, faltered, rage forming a storm upon its shapeless visage. It was as if the air crackled with tension, the very essence of the room sharpening to a pinprick as the scene unfolded like a dark fairy tale. Distracted by the spirit's glowing eyes, I could almost forget the reality of my plight. But then the entity howled, a visceral sound that rippled through the air, clutching at my throat with invisible fingers. Pathetic wretch! It roared, its shifting form now resembling a twisted amalgamation of the crown and Shadow's cruel crown of forsaken glory. You dare contemplate rescue? You have already tasted her misery. You belong to me, no. I screamed, choking on the darkness that threatened to seep into my lungs. I focused solely on the woman before me, desperately trying to fathom what she needed. Her eyes gleamed with a ferocity I hadn't expected, as though she held an unearthly power smoldering just beneath the surface. "Who are you?" I demanded, only to find the question absorbed by the whispers lingering in the shadows. "That I was a servant to the crown," she explained, her tone barely rising above the agony of the entity's howls. "A keeper of secrets sought by the emperors, but my duty turned to torment as their madness claimed me. Yet, I hold the key to their sins, to the darkness that binds you and me. Tell me," I beseeched, trying to drown out the growing cacophony, knowing that time slipped away like sand through fingers. "What must I do?" The moment I asked, the entity surged forward, its tendrils stretching and flickering as if to consume the very essence of my sanity. "You would defy me for a mere shade?" It hissed, a sound that rattled my bones and filled the corners of my mind with creeping terror. "You have already chosen to join this tale of wretched despair." I couldn't let fear rule my choices. Summoning every ounce of will, I treated the air as a shield, forging my resolve in the face of impending doom. The light from the remnants of the shattered lantern flickered, but it wouldn't be enough unless I uncovered the secrets the woman held. The entity lunged, its darkness wrapping around me like chains forged in despair, tendrils squeezing my throat. But amidst the panic, the spirit whispered fervently, "Ignite their memories. Use the crown's fragments. You can harness their anguish to bind the entity." Memories, I chanted, drawing upon the collective pain I had absorbed since awakening in this cursed space. I could feel every heartbeat resonating with the souls of the lost women. It was a fragile connection, hanging in the balance, yet powerful enough to draw forth those unspoken secrets, the weight of their suffering coursing through me. In a desperate act, I reached for the fragments of the crown and pressed them into my palm as if filling myself with the energy of their stories. I drew on their forgotten dreams, their heartbreaks, and their eternal pleas, and exhaled, casting this shared breath outward like a ritual of renewal. The moment became brighter, the space around us shimmering, threads of light weaving a tapestry of the women's lives. Memories danced at the periphery, revealing the perverse joy the emperors derived from their fates. Images of wrathful faces, sorrowful sung texts, and blood-stained uniforms washed over me in waves, each adding layers to the spell I was binding. But just as I felt the collective strength surging to push against the entity's hold, it lunged forward, rage entwining with desperation, its form shifting violently, flailing like a wounded specter. "You cannot control their sorrows. They, too, belong to me." With a jolt, I was thrown from my center, disoriented and lost in the rolling tide of chaotic shadows. As my resolve began to waver, the woman's face came alive again in the tumult. "Remember your own wounds," she cried. "You are not just a vessel. You are the culmination of every struggle." I gasped for clarity, the darkness swirling about as if seeking to suffocate my spirit. In that fleeting moment, memories of my own heartache swelled to the surface, deep-rooted regrets, battles fought in silence, dreams buried beneath the weight of expectations, and each wound intertwined with those of the women, forging a blinding light that flickered in resistance. But as I struggled to confront the entity, the shadows roared with fury. The tangible darkness surged forth, molding a shimmering shape that coalesced into a figure cloaked in crimson. A flicker of recognition pierced through the chaos, and just before the entity reached for me with unfathomable malice, I realized the woman I had been trying to save was not just a spirit of anguish, she was entwined with my fate in ways that traverse time and consciousness. "Embrace your history," she urged, her form flickering like a candle in the storm. Darkness begets darkness, but remembrance births strength. With a piercing scream the entity lunged, its shadowy hand coming down, its fingers like blades aimed straight for my heart. And just as I gathered my will for a desperate plea, I caught a glimpse of the mural behind me, bloodied and vibrant faces of the past watching, waiting, readying their voices to echo back to resurface truths that could vindicate us all. Suddenly, everything broke apart, the ceiling shattered, the walls crumbled, and the light exploded outward. As darkness reprised its role, all I could think was the truth I hadn't been ready for, a truth so terrible it twisted my stomach into knots. "Find the others." The woman's final words lingered in the void, "before the crown claims you too," and as the last fragments of light were swallowed by the encroaching dark, I felt a violent tug pulling me apart, racing against the abyss that awaited. I understood in that fleeting moment that I had to escape into the very heart of darkness where salvation or demise awaited. The world spun wildly as I was thrust back into a realm where the very air was heavy with dread. I staggered, feeling as though I had crossed an invisible threshold into an unreal domain, a dark mirror reflecting the horrors I had barely grasped moments ago. The room reformed around mules now blackened and pocked with ghostly remnants of laughter and tears, illuminated only by the dim, pulsing glow of submerged memories threatening to rise. The echo of the woman's words resonated within me like a mournful drum, a heartbeat of despair that seemed to synchronize with my own. "Find the others." It was more than a directive, it was a haunting summons that urged me to seek beyond my own sorrow. To where? The question spiraled in my mind, but with each flicker of my consciousness, I sensed I was being directed deeper into the darkness, into the heart of the palace that was now a twisted labyrinth filled with echoes of those who once served it, now bound to its cursed legacy. Gingerly, I navigated through the ruins, the air thick with a foul stench of decay and whispered secrets. Shadows pulsated along the walls, each flickering light revealing the specters of past lives, female figures in ornate garments, their faces locked in silent screams, eyes wide in an eternal plea. The wretched tapestry of their existence haunted my vision, each glance pulling threads of memory from my own soul. That I stumbled upon a narrow passageway half hidden beneath layers of dust and decay, the remnants of faded tapestries drooping like the floral wreaths at forgotten funerals. A pull within me urged me forward. Suddenly, I felt their gaze, the combined weight of those lost souls pressing against me, clamoring for recognition. Each step heightened my anxiety, the darkened passage constricting like a serpent ready to strike. The air buzzed with energy, charged like a descending storm, swirling around me in anticipation as if the very shadows wished to share their pain, to weave their stories into my flesh. As I turned a corner, a flash lit up the corridor, a faint, ghostly light illuminating the etchings on the walls. Betrayal is the nature of the crown, and in its embrace, only anguish survives. I felt a sharp chill run down my spine, each word striking me like an icy blade. That's when I heard Ida's soft weeping, weaving through the hollow halls, mingled with the whispers of female voices murmuring my name. I pressed forward, the cries escalating until one voice broke through the din, sharp and desperate. "Help us!" I stumbled into a dim chamber, the atmosphere thick with despair. It was filled with the transparent figures of female eunuchs huddled together, their eyes pools of anguish pooling like shattered glass. If the weight of their collective sorrow had form, I would surely drown in it. "Please, you must help us," one of them pleaded, her face etched with the outlines of a symphony of suffering. "We were torn from our families, stripped of our identities, and cast aside by those we swore fealty to. The crown consumes our very essence. We are but shadows now." "Why?" I stammered, revulsion curling within me. "Why did you not fight back? Why remain silent? The past is a shackle," she whispered fiercely. "But you have the strength. You can unleash our voices." The room trembled as if awakening from a long slumber, shaking violently and causing echoes of her anguish to ripple against the walls. I felt the air grow colder, the shadows coiling tighter as though the very presence of the entity lurked, waiting for the moment to claim its prize. I could see the fleeting specters behind her, each bearing witness to an existence snuffed out by greed and cruel ambition, fingers extending in sorrowful gestures, mouths moving but unable to form sound. It was a deathly ballet of despair, spiraling into a never-ending lament that I am nothing special, I stuttered, plagued by doubts. Why do you believe I can help? Just what? The woman countered, her voice sharpening like glass. Just a vessel for the pain that binds us? You hold their memories, their trauma. You must rise or we will vanish forever. Leaving only our cries to drift through the cursed halls of history, and with that, I felt an explosion of energy course through me, the pent-up sorrows of countless souls merging with my own. I closed my eyes and focused with every ounce of my being, letting adrenaline pulse through my veins as I drew upon the strength embedded in every heartache I had ever encountered. Familiar faces swirled in my mind, the laughs of childhood friends, the pain of lost love, the sorrow of families torn apart. As darkness swirled around me like a storm, I called upon their stories, weaving together a tapestry of remembrance that cascaded forth in waves. Images erupted in swirling colors, voices overlapping, resonating against the very fabric of this forsaken place. And then silence, the shadows shivered, recoiling as if startled by a sudden light. For the briefest moment, the air felt electric, alive with possibility. But without warning, the atmosphere soured. The entity surged back, howling with fury, its winds a tempest of wrath. Foolish mortal! You would dare to awaken them? They are mine. Its voice was a thunderclap, shaking the ground beneath my feet and rattling the chains of anguish that had ensconced me in their grip. With one frantic scream, the furious shadows converged, tendrils reaching forth with agonized desperation, but I persisted, pushing through the barrier of fear with the collective voice of the women soaring within me. I will not let you bind us again. I screamed defiantly, propelled by the strength of their bonds. But as the entity reared back, preparing for an all-consuming strike, the ethereal cries erupted behind me like a maelstrom, every sorrow resounding, reverberating into the air. Torrents of pain coalesced into a singular force, blinding me in a radiant beam. Suddenly, I understood. The very walls began to writhe, responding to our call, as cracks blazed open, revealing another realm beyond, an uncharted territory of pure darkness, deeper than the abyss I had known. Through the entrancing roar of voices shouting, weeping, merging me, sight clouded with anguish, craving release. Find the others, the woman's voice echoed once more, then abruptly, I felt the presence of something else, a chill gust, formidable and alive, surging through the portal as if it was reaching for me, pulling my very essence toward the ghastly unknown, a void stretching out beyond sanity and reason. Just as I felt the constricting edges of the darkness ready to envelop me, I was forced to confront a horrifying truth, the glimmering shadow darting through the opening, a face emerging from the void, its gaze locking onto mine. Will you stand against the crown, or will you join us in despair? And in that fleeting moment, as shadows battled for my soul, I realized I was unearthing not just the horrifying history of the crown but the cryptic fate of all who had been its slaves, those I was destined to uncover, or perhaps to become. A jolt of fear surged through me as the shadowy visage loomed closer, its features swelling out of the darkness, framed by the chaos erupting around us. The figure twisted and contorted, an amalgamation of grief and rage, and I could see the despair etched deep into its sunken eyes, pools of ancient sorrow reflecting the galactic void beneath. Join us, or resist, your choice is fleeting, it snarled, a voice that echoed with the weight of 100 lost souls. Every breath I took felt heavier, as if the very air was thickening with their emotional residue, tethering me to past agonies. The eunuchs behind me trembled, their intangible forms swaying as waves of energy coiled about them, their voices merging into an anguished choir imploring me to decide. But how could I make a choice when reality splintered before my eyes? The radiant energy bristled in the chamber before cracking and splitting the air like glass underfoot. The light splintered into 1,000 shards, and suddenly, each shard became a window, a glimpse into lives irrevocably altered by the cruelty of power. I saw them, young girls, their eyes bright and filled with dreams, abducted under the veil of darkness, mothers torn from their homes, cries echoing as their children reached for them. I saw one woman, an ethereal figure draped in a gown that shimmered like moonlight, crouched in despair, her fingers clawing at the ground, trapped between the ruins of hope and the thorny embrace of despair. "Free us!" they cried in unison, every breath a ripple of pain that cascaded through the air. "No!" the shadow hissed, fingers stretching to grasp at me, closing the distance. "You will become one of them, a wretched soul, a plaything in the crown's hands." I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet, the very fabric of reality warping, and for an instant, I stumbled between the realms, past, present, and future weaving into one. I felt the pulse of 1,000 hearts beating in sync with mine, the weight of their stories tethered to my soul. "Your strength is within their anguish," the woman had said. "You cannot yield to fear." Steeling myself against the impending despair, I focused on the radiant light throbbing within me, the intertwining threads of their stories wrapping around my heart like Venice, a kaleidoscope of grief that ignited a fierce determination. "I won't stand by any more. I refuse to let your darkness consume them." With every ounce of will, I pushed back against the oppressive force, channeling the memories and dreams I had glimpsed. The light surged and exploded outward in a brilliant wave, cascading toward the shadow, illuminating the grotesque features that twisted in fury, but just as the energy collided with the dark figure, an ear-piercing scream erupted around us, drowned in a cacophony of voices spiraling into madness. I was caught in a tempest of sound, chaos pulling at the edges of my sanity, threatening to unravel everything I had just fought to hold together. The air shifted again, suddenly cold, a gale that swept through the chamber, extinguishing the light and plunging me into a darkness so profound that it absorbed my thoughts and my existence. The shadows enveloped me, drowning out the desperate cries of the eunuchs, washing over me like a tidal wave of despair. "Foolish mortal!" the shadow laughed, its voice dripping with malice. "You cannot fight what you do not understand. You belong to the crown." The moment hung suspended in the thick, pulsing gloom, and in that harrowing silence, I felt something cold and grasping wrapping around my throat, tightening with a ferocious grip. The darkness whispered my name, tantalizingly sweet, offering promises of power if I would only surrender. My heart raced. The shadow was drawing me in, the intoxicating power of surrender tantalizing against the backdrop of despairing shrieks. I was one step from the abyss, one breath from oblivion, but deep inside, the voices of the lost women blared like a siren, igniting a fire in my chest that refused to extinguish, and then, just when it felt the darkness would consume my last shred of hope, a blinding light pierced through the veil, a beacon rippling with energy. The shadows recoiled, hissing as the figure coiled around me let out a wail so pained that it shook the very foundation of the palace. "Choose!" it howled, shaking the walls as I felt the ground beneath me warp and shift. The power of the crown, or the freedom of the cursed, with anguish erupting from the depths of my being, the climax of my fears and grief crashing like thunder, I surged forward into the light, feeling the webs of despair fall away like ashes in the wind. At that moment, I understood I could choose not just for myself, but to wield the strength of all those forgotten. And then, as the darkness roiled and writhed with ignited fury, an image flashed before my eyes, one final glimpse of a figure I had not yet encountered, a face lined with wisdom and sadness, emanating an air of unyielding power against the backdrop of the cursed realm. "Find the others," it whispered gently, just before a deafening roar blasted through the air, everything shattered, walls trembled and fell away, fragmented pieces of reality swirling around, beckoning me toward another path, another unknown. Before I could comprehend, another shadow flickered to life behind me, emerging from the depths with an intensity that eclipsed all light. And as I turned, horror gripped my heart. The face was familiar, and dark memories flooded my mind like an overflowing river. One heartbeat, one blink, and I was no longer alone. I had unleashed not just the stories of the women, but the encroaching shadows of their tormentors. "Are you ready to embrace the true legacy of the crown?" The new presence snarled, its eyes gleaming with a predatory instinct that promised chaos, and at that moment, standing on the precipice of despair, I realized the true terror was not just in the spirits of the lost, but within the twisted history that surrounded me, showing a terrifying fate inscribed in blood, sorrow, and guilt, where I might lose myself amidst the threads of betrayal that bound us all together. "Find the others before they find you." In the moment I recognized the familiar face, a chill swept through me, freezing the air in my lungs as though I had plunged into an icy river. The features were unmistakable, sharp, elegant, with hauntingly beautiful eyes that shimmered with an unsettling mixture of twisted loyalty and vindictive power. It was her, the very woman whose demise had been woven into the tapestry of this dark place, a figure known only through whispered stories of tragedy and bloodshed. Do you remember me? She asked, her voice seductive and laced with venom, a melody of despair that felt like an invitation to tread deeper into the shadowy abyss. I was the one who fell for the promises of the crown, who believed in salvation but found only betrayal. Her resonance was palpable, striking a nerve deep within me. I heard the echoes of cries vibrating around us, as if the chamber itself mourned her fate. "You're trapped in my story, just as I was trapped in theirs," she continued, stepping closer with a grace that belied the malice creeping around her. "Tell me, oh brave soul, what will you do with your newfound strength? Will you unleash it, or will you, too, succumb to the crown's legacy?" I staggered back, caught off guard by the intensity of her gaze, as the echoes reshaped memories in my mind, illuminating the truth behind her darkness, a truth that morphed with the shadows swirling around her, like smoke feeding the flames of a long-dormant fire. "Do you wish to know the price of power?" she purred, a grin twisting her lips. "You will find that freedom comes at a cost. The lives of those who came before you are stitched into this cursed ground, their blood sealing the fate of all who follow. But you? You have a choice, a chance to rewrite the ending or succumb to the same fate." Before I could answer, the chamber began to tremble once more, reverberating with a sinister energy that heralded the shadow's tightening grip. Desperate whispers filled my ears, pleading and wailing, a chaotic symphony of their suffering, entreating me to take action, to fight against the tide threatening to drown my soul. Drawing on the fragments of light I had conjured earlier, I envisioned the vibrant spirits of the lost women, their hopes fueling my resolve like flickering sparks against the encroaching darkness. As their faces swirled before me, I could almost touch their anguish, the raw, palpable emotion fueling an adrenaline rush that sent a shiver spiraling down my spine. That I turned my focus back to the vengeful woman. "What are you offering? What must I sacrifice?" My voice trembled, resonating with fear as I made the choice, one I knew might haunt me forever. She stepped closer, her breath brushing my cheek, a disturbing intimacy that nearly made me falter before the weight of her words. "You will wield the weight of their memories, but with that comes the scars inflicted by past atrocities. Embrace future torment or face the judgment of the forsaken who remain trapped. Choose, and in this choice, find your power." The walls shuddered as if responding to my hesitation, splintering reality around me, making each second stretch with a torturous grip. The shadows, no longer just living reminders of the past, writhed and crawled along the floor, stretching eager hands toward me, and snaring the fleeting remnants of light I clung to. Each tendril whispered a promise, coaxing me into their fold, a seductive call that threatened to drown out the cacophony of despair laid bare before me. "I won't let them take my will," I shouted as I thrust my palms forward, forcing the glowing light between us, illuminating the grotesque features of her past that twisted and writhed in reflection. "I will not forget." Suddenly, a piercing howl echoed, shattering the fragile atmosphere of resolve, a sound that toppled the walls of sanity I had been attempting to fortify. From the periphery, figures began to emerge. What shadows had originally confined to their memory now solidified into forms, swirling with a void of lost purpose. Women's faces and men's faces morphed into grotesque masks of agony, tears streaming like rivers of regret, haunted by the choices I failed to make. They surrounded us, a wraith-like circle, swirling like a storm gathering strength, and my heart thundered against the confines of terror. I could feel the fear aggregating within me, dwarfed only by the tidal wave of their collective pain. "Reclaim what was lost," they whispered, their voices intertwining into a grotesque chorus. "Find the true legacy amidst the ashes. You cannot escape." In my heart, I felt an insatiable pull, an overwhelming dread. The faces around me were reflective mirrors of choices long made and paths trodden. My trembling hands ignited in response, the vibrant light spooling outward, but the shadows lunged forward, snatching at the flickering flames of hope. Suddenly, I realized that in my struggle to gather strength, I had unwittingly exposed the royal legacy at its Korea grotesque banquet of memories orchestrating a darker form of violence. The looming presence of power was no longer just a whisper behind me, it was an overpowering force, echoing in the chamber with dissonance, demanding both choice and consequence. The abyss pushed closer, suffocating me as I desperately sought a way to break free. My breath quickened, and dread took root as a singular thought echoed in a choking rhythm: before dawn, all shall be revealed or all shall be consumed. And then, amidst the chaos, I caught sight of something beyond the whirlwind, a darker shadow looming in the distance, not a figment of the tortured past, but a living harbinger of tomorrow's horror, eyes gleaming maliciously, beckoning me towards an inevitable, horrific union. Will you rewrite your fate? It hissed, voice smooth like silk yet laced with thorny treachery. Or join the lineage of the cursed? Time, dear soul, favors neither, and your choice is now. The swirling tempest of shadows narrowed, encasing me in a cocoon of dread as I forced myself to confront the deeper darkness looming ahead. My heart raced with a frantic flutter, an instinctive response to the predatory gaze that bore into me like a dagger. The visage was shrouded in thick blackness but carved with chillingly familiar features, lips curling in an unnerving semblance of mockery. Every pulse of the chamber seemed to echo the lingering taunts of the wraiths surrounding me. Join the lineage of the cursed, the entity echoed malevolently, each word laced with promise and horror. You think you can escape? You think you can choose? Panic coursed through my veins, mingling with the desperation thrumming in my core. I wanted to scream, to run, to deny the very foundation of this place that felt preordained, etched into the fabric of time. Yet the whispers of the damned pushed against my resolve, pulling me closer to that dark abyss at the heart of the chamber, where ancestral blood and treachery conspired. I could feel the heat of my defiance flickering against the invasive chill, the warmth of incandescent memories juxtaposed against the creeping icy fingers of the void, intertwining in a deadly dance. Straining against that impending future suggested by the vast silhouette, I shouted into the tempest, fate is not set in stone, I will fight for something beyond this curse. But the shadows quaked with laughter, a devastating sound that mocked my defiance. Foolish child, the haunting voice sneered, how can you fight the very essence of your own lineage? They were bound to their fate, and so shall you be. We are all lost in the annals of history, endless cycles of despair and sacrifice. The shadows both loomed closer and retreated, their desire fluctuating like tides, a grotesque ballet tormenting the edges of my consciousness. On each turn, I could see the visages of countless women, each one looking at me with eyes filled with unquenched desire, unfathomable sorrow, and an angry plea. They reached out with translucent hands, seeking something, some final closure, companionship, or vengeance. Amidst this chaotic tapestry of emotion, the larger shadow before me twisted and morphed, revealing an outline of a throny, a crude, filthy thing, befitting the horrors it had witnessed. Surrounding it were the figures of men, adorned in garbs draped in saturated blood, imperious faces that loomed with insatiable hunger. My thoughts spiraled. I remembered the stories of the cursed eunuchs, stripped of their mortality for power, a perverse currency traded by their emperors to preserve their legacy while shackling the very life of those trapped within the walls of this realm. The bond forged between a cursed throne and its loyal subjects donned dark roots that entwined their fates irrevocably. One thing became painfully clear: I was not merely an observer, I had stepped unwittingly into the circles of torment, melding my essence with the curses of those lost in history. Your strength will be tested, sweet child of despair, the entity hissed, its form shifting, crumbling like dry leaves before the wind. Embrace what is your birthright, the dark power coursing through your veins. In doing so, you will unlock the forgotten gates of envy and revenge. A chorus of cries erupted around me, embrace it. Embrace your destiny. Their voices intermingled, rising like smoke, a heady concoction of desperation that called to the inner darkness I was terrified to acknowledge. My breath quickened, my mind racing with conflicting thoughts, the weight of that gnarled power beckoning me forth. Around me, the chamber pulsated, brightening and dimming as if it were Olivia heartbeat synchronized with my own rising panic. In a moment of reckless abandon, I closed my eyes, envisioning the vast shadows unfurling, a dark tapestry strewn with the pain of so many. I felt the ancient ties binding me to this fate coiling around me, tightening with each heartbeat, and instead of pushing back I chose to yield, but as I did, a bone-chilling scream erupted, the howling lament of the forsaken. As though my surrender opened the floodgates to their eternal anguish, the very ground beneath me trembled, splitting drastically, revealing a yawning chasm that hissed with the acrid scent of past sorrows intertwined with dust. What? I gasped, panic clawing at the back of my throat. What have I done? From the depths of the darkness, twisted hands shot out. The ghostly figures of the cursed clawed their way toward me, rage and despair radiating from every inch of their spectral forms. The shadows morphed into tangible, grotesque forms, reaching out with gnarled fingers as they shrieked, "You cannot escape our fate. You shall pay the ultimate price." And before I could gather my wits or recover from the sudden horror, the shadows dragged me backward, the edge of the crevice yawning beneath me, threatening to swallow me whole into the depths of eternity. As the abyss loomed closer and I felt the terror penetrate every fiber of my being, I caught sight of the threat I had awakened, the face of the very woman who had called me forth. Her haunting eyes locked onto mine as she smiled wickedly, and I couldn't help but realize that in surrendering to the darkness, I had become an unwitting vessel for their vengeance. "Welcome, dear one," she cooed, "to the nexus of the damned. The pact is sealed, your choice is irrevocable. And now, you shall join the legacy of those who fell before you." With that, the ground shattered completely, yanking me into the void of despair, a chilling laughter echoing through the darker resonance that promised this was just the beginning of a horror yet to unveil. The darkness enveloped me, a suffocating shroud that coursed through my body as I plummeted into an inky abyss. Time slipped away, moments became agony. I could barely breathe, the air thick with regret and the bitter tang of despair. I was invincible. I had dared to understand the curse, dared to lift the veil obscuring the truth behind the lives sacrificed for power. But in doing so, I had also unwittingly sealed my own fate. The cold warmth of blood surged within me as visions of their faces materialized, lost women, savage dreams, and reverberating cries echoing in waves that caressed my very core. I could feel the weight of my ignorance, the burden of their memories folding like shadows into my spirit, awakening something deep and ancient, whispering promises that tasted of bitterness and vengeance. Just as I braced for the impact of despair, I felt the ground solidify beneath my feet, anchoring me in an empty hall drenched in darkness and despair. I stood among the wraiths, their faces twisted and broken, murmuring tales of betrayal and misery. They surrounded me in a ghastly circle, their hollow eyes glimmering with malevolent longing. "Welcome to the throne of fragility," a voice reverberated through the silence, startling me. It was her, the dark figure from before, her shape almost familiar, as if I'd brushed shoulders with her in another life. "You have tasted the sweetness of vengeance. With the blood echoing in your veins, are you ready to inherit their misery?" I was rooted to the ground, fear writhing deep within me. Did I truly want to grasp the entwined legacy of power and suffering? What had I unleashed in this pursuit of truth? The air shimmered around us, expectations swirling like ghostly fingers, twining with my thoughts in a dreadful embrace. "Choose," she coaxed, her voice slithering through my mind. "Become the vessel of pain, the rightful bearer of the legacy that has cursed us all. Or fight, and in doing so, unleash chaos once again." The whisper of their agony pierced through my ear, an electric pulse of grief promising liberation. Refusing the darkness that was always my choice, wasn't it? But as I gazed into the anguished faces around me, I felt something unravel. I trembled at the understanding that the choice between light and darkness wasn't as stark as it seemed. Within their sorrow, their rage tasted like freedom, their thirst for revenge felt like redemption. "Fight?" I scoffed. "What does fighting even mean against a history written in blood?" "You'll not just fight against them," she hissed, her eyes glowing. "You'll confront the root of your own suffering, the very echoes of your lineage embedded within their stories. You've carried their pain, now, it's the crown that must bow beneath your will." A surge of energy exploded in my chest, fierce and unforgiving. I could feel the spirits rallying around me, resonating with my heart, urging me to seize control. Memories flooded my consciousness, my childhood pains, the weight of expectations, a deep-seated guilt that clung to me like a shroud. What if I didn't simply confront the darkness, but rather molded it into the light? With newfound fire, I raised my voice, baring my soul to those surrounding me. This suffering has been our prison long enough. You skewer each other, nestled within a tapestry of anguish, ripped apart by what binds you. Together, we can shatter the bonds that silence our voices. Me voice, a howl ripped through the hall, a fierce ensemble of anger and anguish rising like an impending storm. I felt the walls flicker as shadows danced. The wraiths surged, their ethereal forms swirling, merging their pain with my own. You'll reap what you sow. Only if you unite in defiance can the crown's legacy fray. They cried, their primal fury igniting my spirit, feeding me what was yet to come, and this time, I didn't hesitate. I summoned the crown, the remnants of its agony blossoming beneath my fingertips. Power coursed through me, sparking echoes of the tragic tales woven into its very essence. I turned to the woman, catching the glimmer in her eyes. Together, we will rewrite our fate. In an instant, I felt the whispers reinforce. Light exploded from my being, illuminating the darkness, a rebirth etched in rage and fury. Shadows writhed against the onslaught, shrieking in terror as the broken remnants of their past began to glow, coalescing into a blinding beam. As the shadows crumbled, the darkness threatened to engulf me, yet I remained unyielding, forging ahead. I called upon the spirits, weaving their strength with mine, collective cries rising into a thunderous crescendo, an anthem rebelling against the very foundation that sought to enslave us. But at the last moment, I glanced back, and in that fleeting gaze, I beheld the dark figure, her malevolence intertwined with a flicker of sadness. You can't escape your birthright, child, she rasped. There's still a price to pay. Tendrils of darkness reared up, barreling toward me with unrelenting ferocity. In that heartbeat, I felt the reins slip from my grasp. No! I shouted desperately, consequence clawing at my throat. No more suffering. I surged forward, the light intensifying as it began to envelop the hall, pushing against those binding chains. But the shadows wouldn't let me go. The very essence of the past rising in fury, the entity snarling at the loss of its power, memory swelled forth in a climax of light and shadow, and I understood with a cruel twist in my gut, the price could not just be paid with vengeance. I had to acknowledge the echoes, those I had owed allegiance to, not out of hatred, but in understanding the chains forged through our history. With every ounce of power bubbling in me, I steeled myself against the penetrating darkness and linked arms with those around me. For each scar borne, for every soul bled dry, we will rise, not as curses but as those reborn. The chamber erupted, the foundation roaring back, shattering into fragments of unified energy, light erupting in a flash so bright that it pushed back against the darkness, enveloping the cursed throne in searing brilliance. This was not a battle, this was a reckoning, and as the faces of the Forsaken merged with the light, I realized the true horror awaited after the battle was lost. The legacy would always linger within, an ever-present reminder that every union of strength could still summon forth darkness. In a brilliant climax, I felt the world shatter at the edges of my vision. Amidst the chaos, the dark voice echoed ominously, "Beware. For as long as the crown reigns, every light casts a shadow." And then, as the brilliance swallowed the darkness, I knew I had become part of the horrid cycle, forever balancing the legacy between suffering and salvation. My journey through the corridors of darkness may have forged a new path, but I was never truly free from the curse. With the chilling realization pooling in my veins, I understood one lingering truth that would haunt me through the ages: evil never truly dies, it merely lingers in the echoes of those who dared to forget.